Let's get real. Half the time, you're not sure if your campaigns work. You just kind of hope they do. Attribution numbers look good, but what if those conversions would have happened anyway? Incremental helps you find out for real. No tracking people, no guessing games. Just clear answers on which campaigns actually move the needle. If you want to stop guessing and start knowing, go to Incremental. Because good marketing isn't about getting clicks, it's about getting results. Check them out at incremental.com. That's INCRMNTAL.com. Or click the link in the show description.
The problem is that the distinction needs to be drawn between the competence of the economists and the correctness of their analysis.
Welcome to the Mobile Dev Memo podcast. I'm your host, Eric Seufert, and I'm joined today for the 8th installment of the Mobile Dev Memo Mailbag series by Thomas Petit, who is actually the first returning MDM Mailbag guest. So Thomas, welcome back.
Hi, Eric. Very, very honored to return. And very curious about the questions from the audience.
Yeah, so as a reminder to the audience, these questions are fielded from the Mobile Dev Memo community. Well, some of them, I supplemented the list. I'm in the middle of a move, so I didn't get around to actually publishing the form until Sunday. And sometimes I forget that not everyone's permanently online like myself. So we did get some questions. We got some good questions. But yeah, let's just dive right in. Or actually, before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself, to maybe the handful of people who don't know you, a very, very prominent voice in the mobile space. But for anyone who's unaware of who you are, you can introduce yourself and then just tell me what you've been up to.
Yeah, sure. I'm an independent, so people call that consultant or freelancers. I don't, but it's what it is. It's been about over a decade, like 12 years, something. I specialize mostly in subscription apps, so I don't do that much gaming or fintech, but all kind of subscriptions. I like to work with indie developers, middle class, and very big subscription apps, so a bit of every stage, largely on acquisition, monetization, and the data underlying it. So a lot of attribution, product analytics, and so on.
Well, it's great to have you back. I have been remiss in scheduling these, and I think the audience really loves the mailbag series because it's much more tactical and practical. And so I'm excited to dive in. Let me start with some fan submitted questions. I thought this was a good one because it's just so, you could interpret it a number of different ways. So here we'll kick off with, is incrementality the way?
Yes and no. Obviously, for a very long time, people were not looking at it enough. And regardless what tool you're looking at, like the CPI or CPA or return that you see measured is highly dependent on the attribution method. And it's only since it's got a bit fuzzy for a few years that people are starting, and also because networks are modeling a lot more conversion, that people got interested into non-last click. And, is this really incremental? Would have it happen if I didn't pay for that? Which I think is great, but it's kind of, you need it, but it's not enough, in the sense that for most network, if not all, that's not going to be enough for the network to actually run the ads, even if Meta has some kind of incremental conversion features and so on. But you want for yourself, in terms of budget allocation, the incrementality of it, but you still need the deterministic last click user level, because incremental is not user level. And you still need those for the mechanics of ad auction to actually happen, for the next impression to show up. So I don't think it's never been a replacement. It's something, if you don't have it, for sure you're making a mistake, but you can't have everything on incremental alone just because Meta, Google, AppLovin, TikTok, whoever is not going to be able to properly work from it. So still need a bit of both. And I think that's what makes the game interesting as well, like looking at different methods of last click and incrementality and MMM and whatever. And I think that's the game of attribution. None is right, but you form a better opinion when you pile several of them up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how the sentiment has changed around this. I think, there's a push into media mix modeling a couple of years ago in the sort of like immediate wake of ATT. And, media mix models are great, right? You could have one and it could be very helpful to your business, or you could do some kind of like real-time incremental measurement, like our wonderful sponsors offer, Incremental, the company, Incremental. But it's like, it's not, that alone is probably not going to be sufficient. And so I think there's a little bit of a recognition that maybe the probabilistic approaches were oversold 2021-ish. And I don't know how these media mix model vendors survive. I mean, there's so many of them on LinkedIn. I don't know how are there this many of them? And I feel like do you remember like kind of in the earlier days, the MMPs, there were a lot of them and like they'd have like one or two big flagship customers. It reminds me of Mad Men. I mean, all those little agencies, they had like their flagship customer that kept the lights on. Remember, it was Lucky Strike for, earlier on in the Mad Men series, like, and Lucky Strike left the agency and it collapsed, right? And I think that was the MMP space for a while, and then it consolidated, or it just eroded, and there were a couple, and now there's just so many. I don't know how there are this many MMM vendors. There can't be that many. They're all chasing the handful of. Are they going for brands now? I just don't understand who they're serving, what customer base they're serving, because there aren't that many scaled advertisers that are in that sweet spot of I'm too small to build this myself, but I'm too big to be ignorant of the fact that I need it. Like that's a tiny market space to be going after. And there's like 1,000 of these vendors.
It's even more surprising that both Google and Meta have released like a open source model out of it. And I was discussing with somebody in this field not long ago, and they were telling me over 80% of the MMM companies that you think of are just like a layer on top of those two, like of Meridian and Robin specifically.
Yeah.
They just repackage it very nicely, which is so I don't think that can last forever. I guess the reason there's so many of them is maybe because it's not really none of the solution is perfect. Like clients are always going to be unhappy one way or another. So maybe they some keep switching, but I can't see this continuing forever like this. And I don't know. I've stayed a bit away. I've worked with a couple of the bigger players. I've worked a bit on the open source models, but yeah, there's many of them. I don't get it either. But I stopped trying understanding the mean market of that one.
So I had Michael Kaminsky on the show a couple weeks ago when we were talking about open source MMM. And he runs an MMM company, and we were talking about like the calibration, and it's like all that integration stuff is the product. I mean, that is just integrating with the product, and there's integrating with the client and their data, and calibrating and aligning the output with the business goals. That's the product that you're offering, right? I also listened to a podcast with Olivia Corey on the Marketecture podcast a couple weeks ago. I was in Italy. And she made this point. It's like, yeah, like, House, they do kind of geotests for incrementality measurement. And she's like, we're best friends with the MMPs. We love the MMPs. We don't compete with the MMPs. Like, we complement the MMPs. You need an MMP. All of our app clients have to have an MMP. If we didn't have that, they'd have a lot less data to go on and to be able to use us to do the sort of reconciliation. And so I think we have settled in this configuration where customers or clients or consumer, the app advertisers. I mean, we're talking about apps in this podcast, not like big consumer brands, but app advertisers are sort of like accepting and acknowledging that you need both, and one or the other alone on its own is not going to be sufficient.
I'm more surprised about how many of them still run only on the MMP, but yeah, which is kind of crazy. But
yeah, well, that's a broken way to operate. That whole thing. I mean, you heard about the controversy with like Bill Gates' daughter running that cookie stuffing fraud scheme with her startup.
Oh no, I didn't read about that one. Must have been Euromaxing too much.
Yeah, well, yeah, you've been Euromaxing. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm X-maxing permanently. But she had a startup that was like Honey or whatever. Where you did like rewards and stuff. And so,
oh yeah, I know Honey. Yeah, it's very big. Yeah.
But there was another one that got caught in a similar scam years ago. I don't think it was Honey, but they were cookie stuffing. So they're basically like taking credit for like conversions they didn't deliver.
Yeah.
And this was a tiny startup. They had no revenues. There weren't that many customers. The only reason it was noteworthy was Bill Gates' daughter was like a co-founder. But I mean, I wanted to post that meme of the guy with the noose around his neck. You know what I'm talking about? And like these people freaking out about like having, gotten defrauded by this firm. And it's like, if you're a media buyer on that, you've got some grizzled veteran who's like first time, like this is why you need incremental measurement. And like people complain about fraud, and obviously fraud exists. And I wrote this piece in Ad Exchanger years ago that got like a lot of hostility to it about like, yeah, fraud exists. Fraud's regrettable. Fraud is a moral atrocity. Sure. I agree with all that. But if you're doing your job,
yep,
I mean, it's unfortunate that it exists, and it does cost. It's a drag on the digital economy, and it sort of extracts a lot of money from the digital economy, and it's unfortunate. But if you're doing your job well, you should probably be able to avoid the overwhelming majority of it.
Yeah. I also have this stand where it's basically your fault as a marketer if you get a lot of it. Yeah,
it's your fault.
Yeah.
I mean, you could blame, I don't know, the system. Like, you blame, why does evil exist in the world? Like, I don't know, like, do we live in a just society? I mean, we could ask these philosophical questions, I guess, but we know that fraud exists. Fraud exists in every aspect of life. And, when there's a lot of money on the line, it's going to attract more of it. And so you have to be vigilant. And if you're doing your job, like, you should be able to avoid the vast majority of it. What bothers me is these voices in the space that tell you that you're not sophisticated or smart enough to detect fraud. And I just reject that out of hand. I mean, and they're always selling a service, right? It's like they are smart enough to build the tools to detect fraud, not you, media buyer. And I just ask, the example I usually give is like, we built this tool at a company I was working at a while ago. We just had built this technique, and it was really interesting. And we got invited to like a very large company to present to their marketing org. And I went in there thinking it's going to be some conference room with like 8 people and like a pizza. And it was like an auditorium on their campus of like 300 people. And I just asked, like, out of curiosity, how many of you have PhDs? And it was like more than half. And so like these, some startup influencer, like ad fraud influencer, will tell you, like, I'm the only person that's capable of telling you how much fraud you're encountering. And then you go into a room like that and you say, no, I think I'm good. Like, I think I've got it. Don't worry about us. Like, don't worry about me. And it's not even, that you need a PhD or whatever, you need a massive team. But I think it's just, there's obvious sort of like well-founded techniques to root it out. And to say that you need to subscribe to some service or have some consultant come in and charge you $500K a year, which is a quote I've seen, to run these systems that they've developed, as a team of one. I mean, it's just absurd on its face.
Well, I see it as a lost battle is that when you get there, you're fighting on technicalities, like on how it's actually happening, on detecting it.
Right.
And so, and I guess the fraudsters are always going to be faster and most efficient in finding another way before it's detected. I'm not interested in how it's happening. I'm just interested if stuff I'm buying is largely incremental and there's 20% of fraud mixed inside of it, but it's still incremental as a whole. And I consider that trying to fighting it is going to cost more effort and money than actually. I just want to be aware of the channels that are like largely fraud.
Right.
And I don't need to know what they're doing, the technique, the exact thing. And those detection systems, they're pretty complex. I don't need that. I just need that to know that, hey, there's a lot of it there and I can see it because the conversations are non-incremental, which I don't see on last click, but I'm going to eventually see running in any other method, like incrementality, geotest, whatever. And it should be obvious enough that I don't need a tool. So it's one of the, I'm not arguing that some case might be helpful and so on, but I'm trying to weed out a part that is so big that you don't need this to see it. And if you need it, then the amount of effort is so big that I'm like, nah, I'm not interested.
Right, exactly. It's just a very basic cost benefit analysis. Like, how much is this going to cost me to root it out, and what is your service cost, and like what at what point am I actually losing money here by rooting out this fraud? I read a piece in The Current this morning, and The Current is owned by the Trade Desk, so like you have to interpret everything that you read in that publication through that lens. But they were saying that there's this trend now, or there's this impulse now for companies to actually reduce the amount of creative that they're launching, that this impulse to just always increase the volume of creative had actually become like destructive. And now people are launching too much creative, and that people are seeing success in pulling back on the amount of creative. My sense is that may be true for specific companies, but I think in general, people are not launching enough creative in terms of truly differentiated concepts. There, a lot of times you see people saturating concepts with too many variants, but I still think in general, people are sort of like under-resourcing creative. But what's your take there? How do you see the benefits of increasing creatives? Like if you go into sort of like take the take a client at random, were they launching enough creative? Is that still a growth lever?
I'm fairly aligned with you that it's mostly not enough, and that it went out of a bit of hands because people are launching close variants and like, oh, look, I've launched 1,000 ads this month. And I look at them and I'm like, no, you've launched 18 ads this month. And 18 is just not enough, like, because your 1,000 ads are all the same, which is a bit pointless. So the sheer number, because it comes from above, like, we need to have this minimum. Look, oh, this company does 25,000 ads a month. We need to do like them. And it pushes people towards the just the number, which is meaningless per se. But obviously, almost nobody launched enough concept, enough attempts, enough messaging, enough like sub niche and specific audience, younger, older, whatever, gender, type of players, whatnot. I guess the only counter in that is that we're both thinking about pure performance here. And it's true that you run like more brand ads, or that you have the conjunction of brand and performance. You may want to really choose which shots you give with the brand messaging. But on the performance side, I guess it's almost never enough. So we've gone too far in close variants, but I don't think we're anywhere too far in the sheer number. And the bigger companies I've seen, they have like absurdly high numbers of total creative, but within it, it's still a huge amount of different concepts nonstop. Like, it's a never-ending process. And no, I don't think we've gone too far. I guess it's gonna get even further. Like, ads of creative is so way down. So it's more about I guess the technicality now is not so much into how you produce them. The two hard parts are, one, how do I come with actually new creative that are not a copy, a clone of the previous one that is meaningless because it's exactly the same one. And the other one is, how do you deploy so many creative? Because it's not, when the volume goes up, like, there's a bunch of like false negative. You haven't tried enough, but you obviously don't want to put spend across, like, behind every single one of them because it costs a lot of money. So it's still tricky to deploy, but I don't think the sheer number of creative is supposed to go down now. So I guess defines how it depends how you define the creative, but no, I would mostly disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, you have to kind of try to work backwards and like, okay, what is the trade desk trying to message here? And I think, the trade desk is not in a position to do the same kind of like creative measurement curation that Meta is. And the trade desk just serves a vastly different client base, so it's totally different advertiser categories. Let's say you onboard a new client, you're coming in, you're doing like an audit, kicking the tires. What's the first thing you look at?
Usually the first thing I look at is, how is the data flowing to the ad platform? Then, look at so let's assume I'm coming on the UA side, like on the acquisition side, and people are expecting me to check the ads dashboard or their own dashboard. And usually the first thing I look at is the data flowing to the platform good enough? Like, so typically for Meta in the events manager, or in Google they changed the name 3 times, but like conversion tools, conversion, whatever. Because there's often a mess there, like duplicates, bizarre names, whatever. Sometimes people are not optimizing to what they think they're optimizing towards. Sometimes it's just a very, very dumb conversion. So I just want to make sure that what what the network is receiving, and then only I would get into results internally, or ideally not in the ads manager, but in their BI. And so there's a bunch of definition there. A couple of patterns there would be people who are oversimplifying the like proxy results. And I think one of this pattern is, and it's a bit like what we mentioned about last click and incrementality before. What the platform needs to operate and what you're trying to achieve are two very different things. And if you try to conflate the two into one, it will be suboptimal. And that's why I start looking at what data is sent to the platform, because I want to know how they're going to interpret it. And then secondly, I look, okay, now that we've got this proxy, is it what you're looking after? Because that's not going to be good enough. Like, you're going to be using averages, and you're not going to look at how the cohorting is going and so on. So those would be like, so first checks. I do look at like money distribution. I also try to, especially if I'm coming, I'm like, okay, where's going to be the low hanging fruit? It's either going to be that they've made a blunder, and very often that's in integration and conversion signal and so on. And the second one is like, okay, where is the most money going? Because that's what I'm going to focus on. Like, this small channel that is spending 2% of the spend, I'm not going to look at it first month because I've got bigger fish to fry first. So I'm going to look for the big wins. So typically I'm going to like focus on the 1-2 bigger channel, see Yeah, I'm looking for blunders very often. They often are. I guess as an external, it's also good that you find these blunders in the first months, and it gives you a lot of credibility because there was an instant win. And then only you can get into the high effort wins that are going to take 3 months to build and stuff. But if you start straight up with the hard stuff, people tend to lose trust. They haven't seen like an impact within 3 months, and they're like, oh, what is this guy who look? So I always look for a blunder, basically. And honestly, 99 of the time there is a blunder. Luckily.
That's such a veteran consultant. You just gave out like millions of dollars in consulting fees to aspiring app growth consultants. So that's such a veteran like insight. It just how to optimize the engagement.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
No, but it's true. And
I was discussing earlier today with somebody who was like, I don't know, in the last 6 months, it looks like every 18 years old kid who's had an app for 3 months is actually selling consulting gig. And I'm not concerned. I'm not like, I don't see it as a threat. Just the same way they were before, like an enormous amount of different agencies. And I was like, the few agencies that are actually good, they're going to raise the bar for everybody. That's good. I'm going to see better accounts and stuff. But most of them, they're so bad that they're going to end up calling me anyway. So I'm not very worried about like the long tail of low quality competition ever. Like, yeah, it's not really a big concern. I guess if you're trying to build like a big agency, you look at it more, but I'm a solo person. I don't really mind. It's okay. I'd rather sharing what I've learned on the way and that there's more better people and I see less of the shitty account. But it's true that it's a benefit of when people have it handled very poorly, there's more blunders. And more blunders, you look like you're a star when you're just like, no, I just corrected something that should never have happened.
yeah. Yeah, but it's true. And I mean, it's not like it's extractive or manipulative. I mean, you come up with a quick early win and it's going to be a more productive engagement for everybody because you're not going to be fighting skepticism, right? It's everyone wins.
Yeah, and there's a trust factor. You know, somebody external comes in, you need to see that they're really in, and the wins help everybody. Sometimes when you don't find it, it gets tricky because then you get onto stuff that takes longer and you don't have the buy-in to actually make it happen. And yeah, everything goes slower and is more frustrating. So I don't think that's like bad to do that. And at the contrary, I'm going to try to like what takes the lowest amount of effort first. Let's get a win, and then we move on to the further. It sounds like a logical way to proceed to me.
Yeah, you're right. It's win-win. It's just managing expectations and, like you said, establishing credibility, giving yourself a clear pathway to operate. AI is changing everything, but it's only as good as the signals behind it. Branch connects customer interactions across paid, organic, offline, email, web, and app touchpoints, and turns them into the trusted context you need with links and attribution that capture the full user journey. Learn more at branch.io. And while you're there, check out Branch's AI Search and Discovery Report, covering insights from more than 300 enterprise marketing, growth, and digital leaders to understand how the industry is responding to the rise of AI search. That's branch.io. We've seen this surge in apps submitted to the App Store. It's, vibe coding has given anyone the tools to make an app, and I think that's fantastic. I think that's great. I think people have a very clear, tractable pathway to bringing their visions to life now, and it's fantastic. It's just going to result in more people having more creative output and more choice and more sort of like personal fulfillment with their spare time. I think it's a fantastic dynamic that we're living in right now. But App Store's crowded. There's a lot of junk. It's resulted in a lot of junk being pushed in the App Store. That now it's distribution's become like the sort of like critical skill. So let's say that you're talking to one of these people that's launched their first app. It's just some individual, some solo dev. They did all the coding in Claude. They're very proud of it. Let's say it's a really great product and they want to scale it. Maybe they want to turn it into a business. What's the playbook? How do you go from 0 to 5K in ad spend?
Yeah, the 0 to 5K is kind of the worst. Like I do it for a couple of friends because I like them, but as a business, it's a terrible business. Nobody wants to be in that segment, basically because it's the biggest effort for the least impact. You're not going to be able to like get paid properly, and it's going to be harder. There's no data. You don't know where the creative win is. Like it's really the hardest. Like, so the first thing I'd say is like, have you tried anything that wasn't paid? That because maybe I'm going to see a signal that there is something, like could be a messaging, could be a very particular audience that you may find outside of the normal path. and maybe cleaning the store page and whatever. But usually it's going to be down to like, man, start posting videos on TikTok. And it's TikTok not because TikTok is better, just because there's still organic distribution in there. You can have a fresh account and publish 50 crap video, and there's a good one, and TikTok is going to show it, which that used to happen on Instagram as well. Doesn't so much like on Facebook or Instagram, so it's much harder. And then when I found this angle, I'd usually put my money first on Meta than on TikTok. So use TikTok as a like, what is the angle? What is the messaging that gets people interested? Then put the money behind it on, I would most likely do it on Meta, just because, I don't know, it's not necessarily the easiest, but it's kind of like the one that had the algorithm that picks really fast into who's going to be interested into that product. They're just really, really good at it. And even though competing network can be very good at it, like, and typically Google or Uploving are very good at it, but they require more volume to do that. So I'd rather do it later down the road. But yeah, my first reply is I just don't anymore, like, because it's very tricky. And the second reply is find a message before you throw the money out. It's funny how many conversation I see among these 0 to 1 people indie about how bad the LLM advice is on how to integrate the Meta SDK, how to set up your conversion, how to set up the first campaign. Like, it's really, really bad. And I guess that's the reason most platforms are making it so easy to create your first campaign. Like next, everything is set up by default, which is like both good and bad. But I guess it opens up the possibility for the very long tail of advertisers to get started, which is not a bad thing per se. But yeah, I'd be careful. Like, LLMs are good at many, many things. Doing the 0 to 1 in UA is not necessarily one where they're very good at.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's a horrible. It's just a purgatory for a business. Yeah, the problem. I think the problem though is getting that is scaling up the creative production piece. It's like the whole orchestration and the pipeline. Like that, it just takes a lot of. It's in a big piece of it is just the unknown unknowns, right? It's like, okay, I had to make video creative. How do I do that? And like, I've got to set up some form of attribution. How do I do that? Now, I think if you're going to the 5K, just start with Meta and do, like, I agree with you. The TikTok trying to get organic distribution is where you start. When you're getting into paid, I would go to Meta and stick with Meta up to 10K a month.
Yeah, but
and then
even for Meta, I would try a couple of TikTok to see what's picking, so that you don't burn your 5 or 10K in the first creative testing to realize they were all shit. Like, at least you've done the effort a little bit to see, this is catching attention. So at least although I've seen a lot of people burn their 5 or 10K because they haven't done that. And they come to Facebook with their 2 videos, and there's 2 videos are complete crap, and the first 5K are burned already.
Yep.
That's why even for paid, I would start on TikTok organic, just to say, that one is a bit more promising. I'm going to put my face of my 5K into that one rather than burning it out entirely.
Yes, I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. What tools are you seeing people use to generate creative now? Because people talk about Higgsfield as a creative production tool. It's not. I don't think anyone's using that for creative production. It's too expensive. People are using that for fake influencer videos. That's not, I don't believe that's being used for ad creative. And that's, I think, the problem that company's going to run into. At scale, that's the scalable product. It's ad creative that I don't think people are going to go to tools like that for. I think they're using it for influencer video generation, which you're going to get a lot of people running small amounts of spend there and then not having any success and then stopping. I think the way that they're projecting out revenues, my sense is they're making a lot of assumptions about the durability of scaling those tiny influencers into like large influencers. And they're just, by definition, there aren't a lot of large influencers. But what tools are you seeing people use to generate creative?
I almost don't want to give too many names, because my experience has been, it's so like fragmented and diversified. Like, obviously a bunch of people use the main models directly, because anyway, everything is based on the main models anyway. But I see a lot of fragmentation in there, because a lot of tools are good at just one thing. One is good to make variants. One is good to make the voiceover. So I see people using 11 Labs a lot for voice only, but then not for the video. And then they would use this to make variants and that. Like, there's one that a lot of people have used around me that is called Arcades, that has grown quite a bit. I haven't had the best result myself, but I know a lot of my clients have used it at some point. And I see them high. And I guess it's because we're still in there. Like, to me, it's only about a year that we've got AI video creative. Like, everything that was before summer 2025 was pretty shit, like because the video models were not good enough. And that year has been a lot of experimentation of jumping from one tool to another. And I'm not seeing yet forming like, and everybody has their own process and so on. I see people who work in this field, they're trying to glue different steps into one process that they can package and sell to the clients because they know they're not going to replicate a model. And because they know it's painful to say, okay, so I'm going to have to generate the model, let's say it's a AI UGC, I'm going to have to generate the persona, and then there's the script, and then I'm going to need to edit it, and then I'm going to need to make the voiceover, and then the text over. And actually, it's the whole process of sticking this one tool for each that is quite painful. So I've got a couple of friends that are working on that, but they're very small tools. And if I look at my portfolio, I don't see like a very clear pattern that is established like, hey, that one is great to do AI UGC. And then I see also a bunch of agencies that had to tool for themselves and are slowly moving from, okay, nobody wants to pay for my service anymore, but they want to pay for but I had to build something to stitch these different tools together. But they're usually small. Like I haven't seen any one of them in particular like really become standard in my portfolio. Like, and that's why I don't want to give like a couple of names because I think there is like myriad of names, right? And they change every 3 months because, oh, look, the new shiny toy. And then I see everybody jumping on it. And then 3 months after, nobody talks about it anymore, which is very hard when you build a SaaS in this environment right now, because it's kind of like, even if you manage to get the momentum and a lot of influx of leads or whatever, the whole castle can tumble within a few weeks because there's a new shiny toy. So it's pretty tough. There's also the fact, not only because there's a new shiny toy, but because there's a price war now. And a lot of people would switch just because the cost of credit is cheaper on the other one. I don't really care which output is exactly better. It's just like, oh, look, free credits over there. Let's swap. And that's why I keep seeing people swapping quite a lot. I think it's not going to last like this forever, but because it was the first year for the video, it's still pretty fuzzy how it's going to concentrate. I don't have it very clear yet.
I agree 100%. That's a very tough space to be launching into right now. It's a race to the bottom on cost. You've got really performant open weight models. If I was at a big company, big meaning like, let's say spending upwards of 10 mil a month mobile, I would distill Kimi K3 and into a model that is fine-tuned on my own creative.
But then you say that because we're in August 2026 and it's possible that in November you've got another name to throw.
Yeah, but that would buy you 6 months, I think. You have to do it but if you're a big enough company spending 10 million a month, you're going to spend less doing that than you are running 2,000 creatives a month through some outsourcer or through company basically that's just wrapped around probably one of the frontier models that's the enterprise plan. So like you'll spend less doing that, and maybe you get a year. I don't know. At some point, like it just gets you good enough. Like I talk about this a lot, but like once you've done these integrations, like oftentimes, you've validated this against a need, and it meets the need. And why would you ever upgrade? Like I do all of my transcription of my podcast with Gemini 3.1 Flash preview. Why would I ever change? It's so cheap. And sure, I could go to Flash 3.5. It's more expensive. Why? The transcripts are great. I have no problem with the transcripts. I'm never going to change that until Google deprecates it on Vertex AI. And then I'll just update to like whatever the next most advanced model is, not the cutting edge. I have zero problem with my transcripts. I think they're perfect. I don't think you can improve upon them. So why would I ever change that unless I'm forced to? Because it's costing Google money to process those queries, those prompts. And like the same even goes for the video production, the clipping, all that stuff. I think it's great. I have and you could tell me, well, it might be 8% better if you, okay, so what? It's not worth anything to me. It's worth nothing to me to get 50% better because it works fine. It meets the need. There's certain use cases where, I would generate more revenue or whatever, and then we could have that discussion. But for these things that are just satisfying, they're checking the box, they're satisfying the need, they're serving the purpose, and it's binary in that way, I'm never going to upgrade. And you might get there with creative. You might get there with creative production.
Yeah, we're not there yet, and especially because the video generation costs a lot of money. But your analogy is true for certain niche. Like I see people who have the process for voice, and especially around translation. Oh, I've got this creative that works. I needed to have it in 12 language now. I don't really care if it's 5% better left and right.
Yeah.
Because they found something that kind of works. The process is there and the time gain into just applying this. And at some point they might switch, but we're not there yet for video generation. But yeah, for I guess scripting is also an easy one where it's like doesn't really matter that it's 10x better.
All right, web to app. I mean, I feel like this is I don't know. This feels like old hat. This is not like a new field anymore. This is what everyone's doing. Now, I've got a question, and let me tie that into a user submitted question. And I'll adapt the user submitted question because it's a little too pointed. But talk to me about optimizing the web to app onboarding. Like, how do you think about that in terms of like length and friction, and how do you think about that from like a measurement and unit economics standpoint? Like, how do you think about the impact on the unit economics? Like what's the I don't like. So the question was hinting at like a universal optimum. I don't think there is. It's going to be very context dependent, very client dependent. But like, talk to me about the process you go through to optimize that, and then how do you think about that in terms of like conversion, but also like the unit economics of those people? Do they tend to be better? Can you overcome some of the frictions going straight app to app with just a more optimized onboarding? So talk to me about your process for optimizing the web to app onboarding.
Yeah, I'll answer through different ways. The first one is that if I was in an ideal world, I would want my acquisition to be half on the web, half direct to the store. Less dependencies, like when one thing breaks, which always happen, I've got the other one. The reality is that it's never like this. It's always almost 100% zero or 0 or 100%. I've seen many clients for whom the web to app unit economics, they tried really hard, just didn't work. I've burned myself over $1 million on one that I was sure was going to work and it didn't. And that's on me. But yeah, it always ends up that one of the two is just a better fit for that particular use case. It's especially true, like basically the more the time to experience the aha moment in the app is short, the harder it is to move to the web. So that's true for gaming. That's true for a lot of photo video editors that can show the wow moment instantly in the app. That's true for a couple of utility apps where you don't need like those personalization quiz and so on. And then the opposite way in health and fitness, obviously, a lot of education and a lot of like the look maxing stuff as well. And we're dating, fintech, like anytime there's more complexity into the app, like it kind of makes sense to do that. And I think the wrong conversation all along has been, oh yeah, you're going to pay 5% fee or 3% fee to Stripe instead of 30% of whatever. And this is such a bad reason to do web to app because conversion rates are different and it hides like the whole problem around it. But it's more, I think one of the issues is actually the app store itself is such a bottleneck. Like even if you can change your screenshot and stuff, like the experience is terrible. There's not a lot you can say. And if it's from the ad, if you need something to warm up the user or an explainer or to show something, the app store is a terrible place to do that. And so especially if you've got like low install rate, like kind of makes sense. If you've got long onboarding, kind of makes sense. And sometimes I'm trying to like, what we're doing, are we doing it for the hype of web flows or does it actually make sense for the type of user we're trying to reach? So older users are a bit easier to reach on the web, for instance. Does it make sense to have a long flow? Yeah. Or once we're there, I'm gonna mainly check at some, like I've got a couple of like numbers in my mind that should be acceptable. I'll give you one, like the drop on the very first page. So like basically people who bounce, they click the ads and they would bounce on the whatever you're showing them first. A reasonable number there is 50%. So like 50% bounce is okay, like misclick, they were not interested, whatever. It's actually hard to move it higher. And whenever you move it higher, you lose people later. So those are battles that, but if it's very low, there's probably something to do. And I've been working with a company recently whose bounce rate on that page is around 85%. I was like, there's definitely something we have to do on that page to improve it. And then actually, like the next I look is not even well, I do look at how many people reach the paywall. So like after these whole questions and stuff, but that one is not really one that I try to maximize anymore. Like, because what you're doing through those flow is trying to raise intent. In which state of mind is the user going to be when they're going to hit that paywall, which defines the conversion rate to pay. And actually, there are some people you can actually easily trick them into getting to the paywall, but they're never going to pay. Like, and it's a little bit useless to try to maximize from this 50% to how many see the paywall, but rather I say, okay, how is this change impacting the payment conversion rate without touching the payment? Because that means I'm going to the right direction in selling my product better, in people believe the solution I'm giving is actually going to solve their need. So that would be the second metric. And some of these changes are on the paywall itself, like whether you use weeklies and what's the price point and localization price point and the UX of the paywall and blah, blah. But very often they're on this page. And it's never like, oh, that question is dropping 10% user. No, that question is dropping nobody. But people arrive in a state of mind that they drain when they arrive at this paywall and they don't convert. So very often I look at this. There are some tricks about, I love the Psych framework that was from Darley. It was posted on Andrew Chen blog like 12 years ago or whatever, that every action gives energy or removes energy. And I think it's a very good way of framing it of, am I psyching up people into believing what I'm selling is actually going to solve their need? And so changing some question into reinforcement stuff and curves that go up and social proof and whatnot. And so the next metric for me is really like, doesn't bounce to pay conversion. And I'm not looking so much at the intermediary steps because they're quite misleading. So unless there's a huge bounce on one page, unless the paywall is really horrible, like I'd look at the whole thing, and that's up to the paywall. And that's the second thing I would like maximize on. Lately, I've had this battle with a lot of people, which is when you make the paywall harder, you've got a few more people who are going to get in because they really want to see what's left. But obviously, you've got more refund, which become more and more of a problem when you've got a lot of chargebacks. So one of the tactics, you can try to fight the chargebacks, or you can try to have just less chargebacks and be a little bit more freemium. The playbook here was like, make the paywall completely hard, and whoever is not paying, fuck it, I don't care. And that's how you increase conversion, which is true in the short term. But eventually, having a button, maybe later, having a second offer, letting eventually people who've gone through that whole flow download the app and all, I believe in the long term may be beneficial, not for everybody, but for some apps that, one, you get late conversions. Two, you don't need all this CRM to like do cart abandonment and so on. And three, you're going to get less chargeback. And chargeback are a problem. The same way Apple is going to go at you if you've got 20% refunds on AAP, Stripe is going to go at you. Other merchant of records are going to go at you. So you need to balance this a little bit as well. So yeah, that would be the third one. Like, so bounce, full conversion rate from non-bounce to payments. And then how do I manage the 95, 97, 99% of people who actually don't pay?
But it's important though, because I think, there's no free lunch here. I mean, you make the tactics more deceptive, or you make it a little bit too frictionless to subscribe, and your chargebacks go through the roof. I mean, that could be disastrous, right? I don't think people realize that you have to pay a chargeback fee. So a chargeback, you refund the money and you pay a fee. And it's really problematic. And you could try to fight it, but it's almost impossible. So luckily I've had very few chargebacks. I've been running the subscription on MDM Memo for, I want to say 3 some years now. And I've had like 5 chargebacks.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a very different use case. Everybody wants to pay on your stuff, and it's not you're running aggressive UA into it.
But I've tried fighting it, and I've successfully fought 1. So I've succeeded in 1, and these are egregious. I mean, like I've never encountered more unethical behavior in my professional life than with the chargeback dynamic with these subscriptions, because people are clearly lying. I mean, they're just clearly and obviously lying. Like they obviously forgot to unsubscribe. And, I'll email the people when I get the chargeback notice. I am happy to refund your money. If you're not happy with the product, I will give you your money back. I don't need you to read the newsletter. Just please cancel the chargeback. And I think oftentimes people are just too embarrassed to do it and then respond. And so, you try to fight it. And it's like, I had this person once. They did a chargeback on the annual sub, and I emailed them. I'm like, why did you do that? I mean, I would have just refunded it. Like, you didn't need to do a chargeback. Can you cancel the chargeback, please? And this person writes, well, the sub renewed on Saturday, and so I saw the charges pending on my credit card. And so I thought if I canceled it, because the credit card payment wouldn't resolve until Monday, that I effectively was canceling before the renewal date, and therefore you charged me after I canceled. And I wrote back like, and I looked this person up, and they had an MBA. I was going to write back to them like, if I published this, your alma mater would go bankrupt because no one would ever get an MBA from there again. But I didn't do that. Of course, I just let it go, and I didn't respond. But I just I know that that's not how credit card charges work. But it's so unethical. But going back to the subscription use case, yeah, you make it too easy to subscribe, you're just going to get a surge in chargebacks, and it's going to cost you money. It's not just that you refund the cash; it's also that you have to pay a fee on the chargeback.
There's layers and layers of consideration on those chargebacks, because one is the cost of those chargebacks, but they're actually a threshold until you get kicked. You get kicked, right, and you need to change the provider and so on. And I think in the recent case, there was this very prominent case from the FTC against Genesis that has a lot of subscription recently. And one of the complaints was that it's hard to cancel. One of the complaints was that, the paywall is not very explicit and the full price is not mentioned. And they had a lot of small points here and there, which I believe actually don't matter, even if they're true and it's okay. The real problem the FTC had is that they constructed a whole network of sub-payment companies behind, with the goal to actually dilute the chargebacks around accounts. Because if they were operating through one, the chargeback rate was so high that the payment provider would have kicked them out. And I think they were the main problem for the FTC of, you've designed a system to actually hide the fact that your chargeback rate was very high and to escape the consequences of it. And I don't know if it's true, but it's my interpretation of it. And let's say that you're not as smart as Genesis, that has executed in a way that I believe was actually really well done, and they're very smart people, but you're not them, and it's going to bite back. It's going to bite back. And if you are smart as them, it still bites back, because then you reach that level where the FTC comes back. But they're a much bigger problem than people realize. There's also a problem on IAP. It's just Apple deals with that problem, and usually the consequences are pretty harsh. And you also, I've been kicked out of the store for no reason. I'm like, show me a little bit. I don't think there was no reason. But you never read the story about, Stripe kicked me out for no reason. But there's a lot of people who get kicked out of Stripe, or even other payment provider as well. And then you go to more shady payment provider that would accept, let's say, higher refund risk.
Yeah. I just visceral, cringe reaction when people say that they prefer web to app because it's harder to unsubscribe. That you can sidestep Apple's very sort of easy to use unsubscription tool. And that's just no way to run a business. First of all, I mean, it's just unethical. I think you shouldn't be making a product that people don't want to use, that they don't want to use, and that makes money just as a function of being a complex to unsubscribe from. It's just deeply unethical. But there's just no free lunch. Even if you took that approach, you're gonna pay the piper eventually. You're gonna get chargebacks. That's no way to run a business, ethically or just ruthlessly. It's just no way to run a business.
I'd counter that, sadly, people who forget are a reason that many app developers, and I'm talking on IAP alone here, are actually surviving. Without the people who unsubscribe, a lot of app business wouldn't operate. So it's a bit of a sad reality, but then it doesn't mean you need to maximize this cohort.
Right.
That's just bad. But it's not the only reason people move to the web. I mean, I've always been an advocate on audience and channel expansion, that the auction of Meta is not the same when you run web traffic and app traffic. Google auction is completely different when you run app campaign and non-app campaign. So for me, this was one other reason. And even on payment themselves, even if it's not necessarily just to make it hard to unsubscribe, but the flexibility that you have on payment is just so much better on the web, and in particular to do upsells. So many apps that I know that run those web to app funnels, once you get somebody to subscribe, you've got they just said yes, really easy moment. Are you sure you don't want this PDF on top, and this method, and this body scan, and these supplements, and this? And it's a very good way to actually increase LTV that is really hard to do as an IAP. Or at least the friction is higher. That's a very good one. But also the management of those payments, you can do it in an ethical way that is better for you and the users. And I have something, for example, that I remember once where we were making it easy for people to cancel. But when they ask, we had this would you be interested if I refund you half the amount and you keep the whole subscription? And we had a giant number of users say, oh yeah, that's awesome, I want that. And Apple is slowly moving into that direction with this new retention messaging API that they're offering.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's just so much more flexible doing it on the web. Like there's so much more. And I wish developers see the expansion to the web not as a fee stuff, but as a feature expansion and audience expansion. And I hope Apple and Google sees it and say, okay, we need to do better. And I think Apple has started to get better on this, but they still have a lot to do. Like on refunds, on upsells, on the so in this case, not even win backs. It's like you win back before you lose them. And hopefully, so there's the fee itself, and I hope the IAP are going to standardize at 15% one day or another, and I've always advocated for this. But I also hope we get closer to feature parity with the liberty of how you can handle your customers on the web that honestly is just better at this point. It's better for the user to be on IAP because it's centralized, it's everywhere. Sometimes for a very small developer, because all the tax, all the refunds, like everything is in one place, Apple does a lot for you. If you're a large developer, I hope we're going to get a lot more features around payment on IAP that incentivize developers to also stay on IAPs.
Yeah. No, I've always said that. I've always said that, you should not move from app to web to save the commission because you're going to be encountering a lot more friction that you're probably not accounting for. You should not move from app to web because it's just inherently harder to unsubscribe. That just makes you a revolting person. You should move there because it gives you so much more freedom and latitude to do merchandising, to actually provide a personalized product that's impossible to do in the App Store, and therefore to provide more value to the user. So you can counter the friction with just providing more value and making the value proposition stronger and more compelling, and then you'll overcome the friction. All right, quickly, I know we've got 2 minutes left. Link out. We don't know where we're going to land there yet, but you can do it for free now on iOS in the US because of the injunction. But Apple made the new proposal, 15% on link out. Tim Sweeney's objecting to it. I have a feeling, and this is just an intuition, that Judge YGR is going to accept it. What do you think? If 15% is the link out commission, is that viable?
For some, it's viable. Those will retain, but the enforcement of this is going to be a mess. Like on actually proving that this came before the store, this came after the store, is going to be so messy. Like the finance through it of justifying what should be getting 50% and what not. It's such a mess. So I think it's been a huge win for the developers while it was at 0%. Some developer will still gain with 10 or 15% on it. But a lot of developers, just for the hassle of justifying, I say, fuck it. Like, I just do IAP and pre-app store, but it's just too much hassle to do it. So only the bigger developer with most retained users and so on, and that are able to develop like this extra value because personalization and so on. It's not effortless. So I think it's only going to be good for the bigger developer. And the whole battle of Epic from the very beginning was allegedly on helping the small developers, which I think for the small developers is going to be like, that's it. It's too complicated.
Oh, well, don't get me started. I mean, I think Tim Sweeney has just dropped the mask completely on this. I mean, he clearly just...
I understand his battle, but his battle is not the small developer battle.
Well, but that's, that was the banner that they were flying originally. But this is clearly just for Epic to make money on an Epic game store that charges slightly less than what Apple charges on commission.
We all defend our little piece of meat, we all do it.
Yeah, well, we're not so sanctimonious about it, though. He's just lost all credibility here in terms of the actual reasoning for this crusade. And I actually wonder how it's viewed internally, because my sense is it's seen as a disaster. This is seen as tilting at windmills internally. I mean, they've spent allegedly, this is reported, $1 billion on legal fees. They just laid off a large proportion of their workforce. I mean, I don't think this has been seen as a successful effort internally.
The money and the time and focus, man. I respect that they tried, but it was like, a lot's crusade, in my opinion.
Thomas, this was great. Thank you. How can people find you? How can they interact with you? How can they hire you?
They can't hire me. They can interact with me in the MDM Slack. I'm on Twitter /X and LinkedIn. My LinkedIn inbox is pretty packed, so better you talk to me on MDM.
All right, there you go. Well, what a seal of approval there. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate your time as always.
Thanks.